Most people want power, they want respect, they want influence, they want to be taken seriously. They want people to listen when they speak, recognize their value, and think twice before crossing them. But there is a problem. Most people are trying to gain power over others while they have almost no power over themselves. They cannot control their anger. They cannot control their desire for attention. They cannot control the urge to respond when someone disrespects them. They cannot control themselves when they feel rejected, ignored, criticized, or uncertain. And the moment another person discovers what makes them emotional, they discover something even more valuable. They discover how to control them. This is one of the deepest principles of power. If someone can predict your reaction, they can influence your behavior. If they know what makes you angry, they know how to provoke you. If they know what makes you insecure, they know where to attack. If they know how badly you want their approval, they know exactly how to control you. And if they know you cannot tolerate being ignored, they do not even need to argue with you. They can simply withdraw their attention. You will chase them yourself. This is why real power does not begin with controlling other people. It begins with controlling the part of yourself that other people can manipulate, because the person who cannot control himself will always be controlled by something, an emotion, a temptation, an opinion, a person, a fear, or a desire. And until you understand this, you may spend your entire life believing that power means making other people obey you. It does not. The deepest form of power is reaching a point where other people's behavior no longer controls your mind. That is where self-control begins. Faith chapter begins. The first battle is with yourself. Imagine someone insults you in front of other people. Your instinct is immediate. You want to defend yourself. You want to prove that they are wrong. You want to make them regret what they said. Your body becomes tense. Your mind starts producing arguments. You imagine the perfect response. You think about what you should say, and suddenly remaining silent feels impossible. But look carefully at what just happened. Someone said a few words, and those words created an emotional reaction inside you. Now, the question is not whether the insult was justified. The question is this: who is controlling whom? Because if another person can say something and immediately force you into a predictable emotional response, they have discovered a weakness. They have found a button, and they only need to press it. This is why self-control is not weakness. It is protection. A person who cannot control anger can be controlled through provocation. A person who needs approval can be controlled through praise. A person who fears rejection can be controlled through withdrawal. A person who is obsessed with attention can be controlled through silence. A person who cannot tolerate uncertainty can be controlled by anyone willing to keep them waiting. The more predictable your emotional reactions become, the easier you are to manipulate. Real power begins when something happens and you create a space between the event and your response. Something happens, you feel the emotion, but you do not immediately obey it. You pause, you observe, you ask yourself what is actually happening. Is this situation worth my energy? Is responding going to improve my position? Am I acting because this is strategically necessary, or am I simply trying to relieve an uncomfortable emotion? That pause is small, but it can change your entire life, because inside that pause is choice. And where there is choice, there is control. You do not need to become emotionless. You need to stop allowing emotions to become commands. Anger can tell you that a boundary has been crossed. Fear can warn you about danger. Desire can show you what you value. Jealousy can reveal an insecurity. Pride can show you where your ego is attached. But emotions should provide information. They should not make your decisions for you. The strongest person in the room is not always the loudest. Sometimes it is the person who can remain completely still while everyone else is losing control. While others rush to speak, he listens. While others reveal their frustration, he observes. While others react to the present moment, he thinks about what their reaction will create tomorrow. That patience creates an advantage, because once you master yourself, you become harder to provoke, harder to manipulate, harder to predict, and eventually other people realize something. They can no longer control your emotional state simply by changing their behavior. That is the beginning of psychological freedom. Favi, chapter 2:9, never let emotion make permanent decisions. Most people believe they make rational decisions. They think about something, they consider the options, then they act. But often the decision was made before the thinking even began. Anger made the decision, fear made the decision, insecurity made the decision, desire made the decision, pride made the decision, and the mind simply created an explanation afterward. You tell yourself you are defending your dignity, but perhaps you are defending your ego. You tell yourself you are fighting for what you deserve, but perhaps you simply cannot tolerate losing. You tell yourself you need an answer immediately, but perhaps uncertainty is making you uncomfortable. This is dangerous because emotion makes the present moment feel more important than the future. When you are angry, you want revenge now. When you are lonely, you want attention now. When you are rejected, you want reassurance now. When you are afraid, you want certainty now. But power requires you to think beyond now. Ask yourself, what will this decision cost me tomorrow? What will it cost me next month? What will happen if I act while emotional? Imagine someone deliberately provoking you. They question your intelligence. They insult your character. They challenge your status. Your mind immediately tells you that you must respond. But why? Because your ego has interpreted silence as weakness. And this is where many people lose power. They think reacting proves strength, but sometimes reaction proves the opposite. If someone can make you abandon your judgment simply by insulting you, they have more control over you than you realize. You do not have to suppress the emotion. You have to delay obedience to it, walk away from the argument, wait before sending the message, sleep before making the decision, listen before defending yourself, observe before judging. Give the emotional intensity time to decrease, because when the emotion becomes weaker, your vision becomes wider. You begin seeing things that anger prevented you from seeing. You begin noticing motives, patterns, consequences, possibilities, and suddenly what felt like an emergency yesterday no longer deserves your attention today. This is why powerful people develop the ability to delay reaction. They understand that the first response is often emotional, the second response can be strategic, and strategy requires distance. The next time you feel an intense urge to do something, do not immediately ask, "What should I do?" Ask, "Why do I feel compelled to do this right now?" That question creates distance, and distance gives you control. Juan Fi, chapter 3c, control what you reveal. There is another form of self-control that most people completely ignore. Control over what you reveal. Most people talk too much. They explain their plans, they announce their ambitions, they reveal their insecurities, they describe their frustrations, they defend every decision. They tell people what they are going to do before they have done it, and they believe this makes them honest. But excessive revelation can create another problem. It gives people a map of your mind. Every reaction communicates something, your expression communicates something, your hesitation communicates something. Your defensiveness communicates something. The subjects you avoid can communicate something. The things that anger you can communicate something. If someone knows exactly what makes you emotional, they know how to influence you. If they know what you fear, they know how to pressure you. If they know what you desperately want, they know what you are willing to sacrifice. This is why restraint is so powerful. You do not need to explain every decision. You do not need to announce every goal. You do not need to tell everyone what you are struggling with. And you certainly do not need to reveal your entire internal world to people who have not earned access to it. Think about how often people destroy their own momentum by talking too early. They announce the goal before doing the work. They talk about the business before building it. They describe the transformation before making the sacrifice. They tell everyone what they are going to accomplish. Then circumstances change, and now they feel pressure to protect an image they created with their own words. Silence creates flexibility. When you reveal less, you have more room to move. You can change your strategy without announcing that you changed it. You can observe without constantly explaining yourself. You can learn information without giving away your own intentions. This does not mean becoming fake or mysterious. Forced mystery is still insecurity. The deeper principle is discretion. Know what deserves to be shared. Know with whom it should be shared. and know when it should be shared. There will always be people who try to pull information out of you. They ask questions disguised as casual conversation. They provoke you to see how you react. They challenge your decisions because they want you to reveal your reasoning. They create tension because they hope you will say something you normally would have kept private. You do not have to participate. You can answer briefly. You can listen. You can allow silence. You can say less than expected. And this is where many people fail. They cannot tolerate silence. So they fill it. And while filling it, they reveal more than they intended. Learn to tolerate silence, because sometimes the person who speaks less sees more. And sometimes the strongest answer is the one you never needed to give. Fei chapter 40. Stop needing everyone to understand you. One of the greatest traps of human psychology is the need to be understood. Someone misunderstands you, you immediately want to correct them. Someone criticizes you, you want to defend yourself. Someone forms the wrong opinion, you want to explain the truth. But ask yourself something. Do you really need to control every person's perception of you? You cannot. People interpret you through their own experiences, their insecurities, their expectations, their biases, their emotions. Sometimes people misunderstand you because they do not have enough information. Sometimes they misunderstand you because they want to, and trying to correct every perception can become a prison. You spend your life reacting to opinions that were never under your control in the first place. Your goal should not be to control what everyone thinks of you. Your goal should be to control how much access their opinions have to your internal world. Someone thinks you are arrogant. You do not have to panic. Someone thinks you are weak. You do not have to prove them wrong immediately. Someone does not recognize your value. You do not have to perform for their approval. Let your actions create the evidence. This is one of the quietest forms of power. You stop arguing with perceptions. You start building reality. You stop explaining that you are disciplined. You become disciplined. You stop explaining that you deserve respect. You establish boundaries. You stop announcing that you are becoming successful. You build something valuable. You stop trying to convince people that you are confident. You become comfortable with yourself. Eventually, your behavior speaks more loudly than your explanations ever could, and this changes your presence. Because people sense when someone no longer needs to prove himself. There is a difference between confidence and performance. Performance needs an audience. Confidence does not. When you become secure internally, you can listen without needing to win. You can admit a mistake without feeling destroyed. You can change your strategy without feeling humiliated. You can walk away from an argument without believing you lost. And you can let someone misunderstand you without immediately chasing their approval. That is not weakness. That is independence. Fatih chapter 50, turn patience into power. Most people think power means acting quickly. They want immediate results, immediate answers, immediate attention, immediate success. But impatience makes people predictable. When you desperately want something to happen, you become easier to influence. You rush conversations. You accept poor opportunities. You reveal intentions too early. You make decisions before you have enough information. You act because you are afraid that waiting will cause you to lose. But urgency can distort judgment. Sometimes the greatest advantage you can create is the ability to wait, not passive waiting. Strategic patience. The difference is enormous. Strategic patience means you are waiting because you are learning, preparing, observing, gathering information, allowing circumstances to change. People expose themselves over time. Promises become patterns. Words become actions. Intentions become visible. Someone may appear trustworthy during one conversation, but give them enough time, and their behavior will tell you who they really are. This is why patience is connected to power. Time reveals what emotion hides. Time exposes inconsistencies. Time reveals motives. Time allows you to see whether someone's words and actions actually match. And patience protects you from your own impulses. You do not need every answer immediately. You do not need to chase someone simply because they became distant. You do not need to accept the first opportunity simply because you are afraid another will not appear. You do not need to respond to every provocation today. Sometimes doing nothing is not surrender, it is information gathering. While others rush, you observe. While others reveal themselves, you learn. While others spend energy trying to force an outcome, you wait for conditions to become favorable. But patience does not mean waiting forever. When the moment arrives, you act decisively. The disciplined person does not wait because he is afraid. He waits because he understands timing. And when the opportunity is right, hesitation disappears. This is why patience can become a form of power. The world constantly tells you to hurry, respond immediately, decide immediately, speak immediately, buy immediately, prove yourself immediately, but you do not have to obey every demand for speed. You can pause, you can think, you can wait, and sometimes the person who can wait the longest has the greatest freedom to choose. FOP Chapter 6c, Build Power Through Discipline. There is a difference between looking powerful and actually possessing power. Many people want the appearance of strength. They want impressive clothes, strong words, status, recognition. They want people to believe they are confident. But appearance can only survive for so long. Eventually, reality asks a simple question. What happens when nobody is watching? That is where discipline begins. If your confidence disappears when you are criticized, it was never confidence. If your discipline disappears when nobody is watching, it was never discipline. If your principles disappear when temptation becomes strong, they were never principles. Real power is built privately. It begins with the promises you make to yourself. Every time you tell yourself you will do something and then abandon it because you are tired, distracted, or tempted, you teach your mind something. You teach yourself that your own word has no authority. But every time you make a commitment and keep it, especially when you do not feel like keeping it, something changes. You begin trusting yourself, and self-trust creates internal authority. Consider two people. One constantly talks about what he is going to accomplish. He describes his future. He imagines how successful he will become. He wants everyone to know what he is building. The other person says almost nothing. He simply works. He wakes up when he said he would wake up. He develops the skill he decided to master. He continues when progress becomes slow. He keeps going when motivation disappears. Over time, the difference becomes impossible to hide. The disciplined person develops competence, and competence creates natural authority. People trust those who consistently do what they say. They respect those who remain stable under pressure. They notice the person who does not constantly change direction according to mood. This is why power should never be confused with aggression. Aggression often reveals a lack of control. Someone who needs to dominate every conversation may be trying to convince himself of his own importance. Someone who becomes furious whenever challenged may be protecting a fragile ego. Someone who constantly needs recognition may secretly depend on external validation. True strength does not need constant advertisement. The more secure you become internally, the less you need to perform. You can listen without needing to win. You can admit that you were wrong. You can change your mind. You can walk away. You can say no. You can remain silent. And you can continue working without anyone applauding. That is discipline. And discipline is one of the foundations of power. Fafi Chapter 70 become difficult to control. Eventually, self-control leads to something deeper. You become difficult to control, not because you become cold, not because you stop caring, but because you stop giving other people control over your emotional stability. Think about validation. Give someone praise and they become attached to you. Withdraw the praise and they begin questioning themselves. Give them attention and they feel important. Take it away and they start chasing. Approve of their decisions and they become confident. Criticize those same decisions and suddenly they doubt everything. When your emotional stability depends on another person's approval, you have given that person authority over you. Self-control means taking that authority back. You can appreciate people without needing their approval. You can enjoy attention without depending on it. You can accept criticism without allowing it to define you. You can experience rejection without believing that rejection determines your value. Someone ignores you. The old version of you might chase. You send another message. You demand an explanation. You try to prove your value. But the self-controlled person asks a different question. Why should someone else's decision determine how I see myself? Their silence describes their behavior. It does not automatically describe your worth. Their rejection describes their decision. It does not automatically describe your value. Their criticism may contain something useful, but it does not automatically make them right. You must learn to evaluate yourself without constantly waiting for the world to give you a verdict. This is especially important when dealing with manipulation. People often discover emotional dependencies and use them. If they know you cannot tolerate being disliked, they can pressure you through disapproval. If they know you fear abandonment, they can threaten to leave. If they know you desperately want recognition, they can give or withdraw praise to influence your behavior. But when you become comfortable standing alone, these strategies lose power. You become capable of saying no without guilt. You can leave situations that repeatedly violate your boundaries. You can disappoint people when necessary. You can walk away from relationships that demand that you betray yourself simply to keep them. You can choose long-term self-respect over short-term acceptance. That is psychological independence. And psychological independence does not mean refusing advice. You can listen, you can learn, you can change, but you decide what enters your mind. Your judgment remains yours. Praise comes, you remain grounded. Criticism comes, you remain grounded. Opportunity comes, you remain grounded. Rejection comes, you remain grounded. People celebrate you, you remain grounded. People turn against you, you remain grounded. Because your center is no longer outside of you. Fafi chapter 80, the final lesson. Master yourself, the external world will always change. People will change their opinions. Relationships will begin and end. Opportunities will appear and disappear. Some people will respect you. Others will misunderstand you. Some will praise you, will criticize you. And if your emotional state rises and falls with every external change, you will spend your life being controlled by things you cannot command. But when your stability comes from within, something changes. You become harder to manipulate. You no longer need to chase people to prove your worth. You no longer need to react to every insult to protect your ego. You no longer need to explain yourself to everyone who misunderstands you. You no longer need immediate rewards to remain committed to your path. You become your own source of authority. This is the final lesson of self-control. Power is not the ability to make everyone obey you. Power is the ability to remain yourself when the world is trying to make you react. It is controlling your anger when someone wants to provoke you. Controlling your words when silence would serve you better. Controlling your desires when temptation appears. Controlling your ego when someone challenges you. Controlling your need for approval when someone withdraws attention. Controlling your impatience when the outcome is uncertain. Controlling your habits when nobody is watching, and controlling your decisions when emotion is demanding an immediate answer. Every time you refuse an unnecessary reaction, you become stronger. Every time you delay gratification, you become stronger. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you become stronger. Every time you walk away from something that violates your principles, you become stronger. Every time you choose long-term self-respect over short-term approval, you become stronger. You are training your mind to understand one simple truth. You are in command, not your anger, not your fear, not your ego, not your loneliness, not someone else's approval, not someone else's rejection. And once you understand this, your relationship with power changes completely. You stop trying so desperately to control other people. You become more interested in controlling yourself. You stop asking, how can I make them respect me? And start asking, why do I need their respect to feel powerful? You stop asking, how can I make them chase me? And start asking, why am I willing to chase someone who does not value me? You stop asking, how can I win this argument? And start asking, does winning this argument actually improve my life? You stop asking, how can I prove myself? And start asking, what would happen if I simply became undeniable? That is the transformation. The person who needs to prove his power is still dependent on other people. The person who has developed internal power does not need to advertise it. His discipline speaks, his patience speaks, his restraint speaks, his boundaries speak, his consistency speaks, his silence speaks. He does not need to control every room because he has learned to control himself. And that is why the deepest form of power is not domination, it is self-mastery. Because if you cannot control yourself, every weakness becomes an entrance through which someone else can control you. But when you master your emotions, your words, your impulses, your timing, your habits, your ego, and your need for approval, something remarkable happens. You become difficult to manipulate, difficult to provoke, difficult to pressure, difficult to predict, and most importantly, difficult to control. The world will continue testing you. People will test your patience. Circumstances will test your discipline. Rejection will test your confidence. Success will test your ego. Temptation will test your principles. And every test will ask you the same question. Who is in control? The person who insults you? The person who ignores you? The person who rejects you? The person who praises you? The circumstances around you or you? Your answer will not come from what you say. It will come from how you behave when your emotions are strongest. That is where your real power is revealed. Not when everything is going your way, but when everything is trying to pull you away from yourself. Remain calm, observe, think, wait, choose, and then act. Because the moment you stop allowing temporary emotions to make permanent decisions, you begin taking your life back. The moment you stop needing other people to validate your worth, you become free. The moment you stop trying to appear powerful and start becoming disciplined, you become strong. And the moment you master yourself, you possess something far more valuable than control over other people. You possess control over the one person whose behavior determines the direction of your entire life, yourself. True power begins there, and it ends there, because the person who governs his own mind possesses the foundation of every other form of power. There is another level of power most people never reach. They learn to control their anger. They learn to stay silent. They learn to become patient. They learn not to chase approval. And they think they have mastered themselves. But there is a deeper enemy, the need to control the outcome. Because even when you stop reacting emotionally, you may still be secretly demanding that reality behave according to your expectations. You want people to respect you. You want relationships to work. You want your plans to succeed. You want your efforts to be recognized. And when reality refuses to cooperate, frustration appears. This is where true self-control becomes difficult, because controlling yourself does not mean controlling life. You cannot control what people think. You cannot control who stays. You cannot control who leaves. You cannot control whether someone recognizes your value. You cannot control whether an opportunity appears at the exact moment you need it. You can only control how you respond. And the person who understands this becomes extraordinarily difficult to destabilize. Chapter 19, stop trying to control what you cannot control. Think about how much mental energy people waste trying to control things that were never theirs to control. They replay conversations, they analyze someone's message, they wonder why someone changed. They obsess over what another person might be thinking. They imagine future scenarios, they worry about outcomes that have not happened. And all of this creates the illusion of action. But thinking about something repeatedly does not mean you are controlling it. Sometimes you are simply torturing yourself with uncertainty. The mind hates uncertainty. It wants an answer. It wants closure. It wants guarantees. But life rarely gives guarantees. This is why uncertainty can be used as a psychological weapon. If you desperately need certainty, anyone who can withhold information from you gains influence. If you need to know exactly how someone feels, their silence can destabilize you. If you need to know whether an opportunity will work, hesitation can paralyze you. If you need to know what the future will look like, every unexpected event becomes a threat. The solution is not to eliminate uncertainty. The solution is to become comfortable operating inside it. You do not need to know everything before making a decision. You need enough information to make the best decision available. Then you act, and if reality changes, you adapt. This is a major difference between a psychologically strong person and a psychologically dependent person. The dependent person needs certainty before moving. The strong person can move without certainty. He understands that information will continue arriving. He understands that some mistakes are unavoidable. He understands that control does not come from predicting everything. It comes from trusting his ability to respond. That is a much deeper form of confidence. You stop saying, "What if everything goes wrong?" and start saying, if something goes wrong, I will deal with it. That single shift changes the psychology of a person. You no longer need life to guarantee your safety. You begin trusting your capacity to handle difficulty. And when you trust yourself, uncertainty loses much of its power. Chapter Tundi, never make your identity dependent on success. Another hidden weakness is attachment to identity. People do not simply want to succeed. They want success to prove something about who they are. They want money to prove they are valuable. They want attention to prove they are attractive. They want status to prove they are important. They want relationships to prove they are lovable. They want achievements to prove they are capable. And this creates a dangerous psychological trap because when success becomes part of your identity, failure feels like an attack on your existence. A mistake is no longer a mistake. It becomes, I am a failure. Rejection is no longer rejection. It becomes, I am not valuable. A criticism is no longer information. It becomes, they are attacking who I am. This is why some people become irrational when challenged. They are not protecting an idea. They are protecting their identity. And once identity becomes involved, reason becomes difficult. You can lose an argument without losing your intelligence. You can lose an opportunity without losing your potential. You can lose a relationship without losing your worth. You can fail at something without becoming a failure. These distinctions matter because the person who separates identity from outcome can recover much faster. He can examine failure objectively. What went wrong? What did I misunderstand? What can I change? What can I learn? And then he moves. The ego wants to ask, how could this happen to me? The disciplined mind asks, what does this teach me? One question protects the ego. The other builds power. This is why you should never make one outcome responsible for defining your entire identity. Build an identity around qualities you control: discipline, integrity, patience, courage, consistency, adaptability, self-respect. These cannot be taken away by a single failure. Someone can take an opportunity from you. They cannot take your discipline. Someone can reject you. They cannot take your ability to improve. Someone can criticize you. They cannot take your ability to think. Someone can leave. They cannot take your ability to stand alone. This is how you become psychologically resilient. You stop building your identity on things that can disappear, and you start building it on qualities you can repeatedly demonstrate. Chapter 11. Control the need to be right. One of the most expensive forms of ego is the need to be right. People destroy relationships over it. They lose opportunities over it. They continue unnecessary arguments over it. They refuse useful advice because admitting someone else was right feels humiliating. But ask yourself something. What is more important, being right or getting the right outcome? These are not always the same thing. Sometimes you can win an argument and lose the relationship. You can prove your point and destroy trust. You can defend your ego and damage your future. The intelligent person learns to separate truth from pride. If someone gives you useful information, use it. It does not matter whether you discovered it yourself. If someone exposes a mistake, examine it. You do not become weaker by correcting yourself. You become stronger. There is enormous power in being able to say, I was wrong, without collapsing, without making excuses, without immediately searching for someone else to blame. This requires internal security. An insecure person protects every mistake. A secure person protects the truth. That is a completely different mindset. When you stop needing to win every interaction, your attention becomes available for something more important: learning, observation, strategy. You begin listening differently. Instead of listening for an opportunity to respond, you listen for information. Instead of asking, how can I prove them wrong? You ask, what are they seeing that I am not seeing? That question can save you years of unnecessary mistakes, because sometimes the person you dislike is showing you something you desperately need to learn. And sometimes criticism contains information, even when the critic has poor intentions. Take the information. Leave the emotional baggage. That is self-control. Chapter 12 is I learned to withdraw without drama. There is another form of power that most people misunderstand. Withdrawal, not punishment, not manipulation, not silent treatment. Withdrawal means recognizing when something no longer deserves your energy. Some people spend years fighting battles that were never worth winning. They keep explaining, keep arguing, keep proving, keep returning, keep demanding closure. But sometimes the strongest move is to stop participating. You do not need to announce your departure. You do not need to make a dramatic statement. You do not need to make someone regret losing access to you. You simply redirect your attention. This is difficult because the ego wants recognition. It wants the other person to understand what they lost, wants them to regret their behavior. But that still gives them control. You are still waiting for their reaction. Real withdrawal is different. You leave because your decision has already been made. You do not need them to understand it. You do not need them to agree. You do not need them to regret it. You simply move. This principle applies everywhere. A conversation that repeatedly produces conflict, a relationship that repeatedly violates your boundaries, an environment that consistently destroys your focus, a habit that repeatedly weakens your discipline. Sometimes the most powerful response is not confrontation, it is distance. And distance creates perspective. When you are constantly inside a situation, emotion distorts your judgment. Step away, observe, then decide whether you actually want to return. The ability to withdraw gives you freedom, because if you know you can leave, you become much harder to control. You stop tolerating everything simply because you are afraid of losing something. You stop accepting disrespect because you fear being alone. You stop remaining in bad situations because you are terrified of change. You realize something important. Losing access to something unhealthy is not always a loss. Sometimes it is the beginning of your freedom. Chapter 13e, control your attention. Your attention is one of the most valuable forms of power you possess, and most people give it away constantly. They wake up and immediately consume other people's opinions. They check messages. They scroll, they compare, they react. They consume information they never needed. Then they wonder why they cannot focus on their own lives. But attention determines direction. Whatever repeatedly receives your attention begins influencing your mind. If you constantly focus on other people's success, comparison grows. If you constantly focus on criticism, insecurity grows. If you constantly focus on entertainment, discomfort becomes harder to tolerate. If you constantly focus on conflict, your mind becomes trained to search for conflict. Your attention is not neutral. It shapes perception. This is why disciplined people protect it. They understand that not everything deserves access to their mind. Not every opinion deserves consideration. Not every argument deserves a response. Not every notification deserves attention. Not every opportunity deserves pursuit. And not every person deserves unlimited access to you. Ask yourself, what am I repeatedly looking at? What am I repeatedly thinking about? What am I repeatedly consuming? What emotions does it create? And what kind of person is that training me to become? Because your habits are not merely consuming time, they are training your psychology. Every time you choose focus over distraction, you strengthen focus. Every time you choose silence over unnecessary stimulation, you strengthen inner stability. Every time you choose meaningful work over instant entertainment, you strengthen your ability to tolerate effort. Eventually, attention becomes a weapon, not because you use it against other people, but because you can direct it deliberately. While others are constantly distracted by what everyone else is doing, you remain focused on what matters. While others react to every new event, you remain committed to the larger objective. While others consume endlessly, you create. That difference compounds. And over years, it becomes enormous. Chapter 120, become comfortable with being alone. There's a level of self-control that requires solitude, not loneliness. Solitude. The ability to spend time without constantly needing external stimulation. This reveals something about you. Can you sit with your own thoughts? Can you work without applause? Can you make decisions without asking everyone for permission? Can you pursue something when nobody understands why? Can you remain committed when nobody is watching? Many people cannot. They constantly need reassurance. They need conversation. They need attention. They need someone to tell them they are doing the right thing. And because of this, they become vulnerable to whoever provides that reassurance. If you can only feel valuable when someone else validates you, you have outsourced your self-worth. That is dangerous. You should be able to receive love without depending on it for identity. You should be able to enjoy company without fearing solitude. You should be able to listen to advice without surrendering your judgment. You should be able to stand alone without believing you have been abandoned by the world. Solitude gives you something modern life constantly takes away: your own voice. When everyone else becomes quiet, you begin noticing your real thoughts. What do you actually want? What are you afraid of? Which goals are truly yours? Which ambitions were created by comparison? Which relationships are based on genuine connection? And which ones are simply attempts to escape being alone? These questions are uncomfortable, but discomfort reveals truth. And the person who can tolerate uncomfortable truth becomes much harder to manipulate because he no longer needs to lie to himself. Chapter 15T, the final discipline. Choose yourself. Eventually, all of these principles lead to one decision. Choose yourself, not your ego, not selfishness, not arrogance. Your deeper self, the part of you that knows what matters, the part that understands your long-term future, the part that can tolerate temporary discomfort for lasting freedom. Choosing yourself means saying no when saying yes would betray your principles. It means walking away when staying would destroy your self-respect. It means continuing when nobody applauds. It means accepting criticism when it contains truth. It means rejecting criticism when it is only manipulation. It means learning from failure without becoming defined by it. It means refusing to let rejection become an identity. It means refusing to let another person's opinion become your internal voice. And most importantly, it means accepting responsibility for your emotional life. Other people may influence you. Circumstances may affect you. Life may hurt you. But you still have a choice about what you do with what happens. That is where your power lies. You cannot control the entire world. You do not need to. Control your response, control your attention, control your words, control your habits, control your impulses, control your standards, control your access, control your time, control your decisions, and slowly you will discover that the less you try to control other people, the more powerful you actually become because you are no longer dependent on their behavior. You do not need someone to behave perfectly before you can remain calm. You do not need someone to respect you before you respect yourself. You do not need someone to choose you before you choose yourself. You do not need someone to understand you before you understand yourself. And you do not need the world to become easier before you become stronger. That is the deepest form of self-control. You stop demanding that reality protect your emotions. You train yourself to handle reality. And once you can do that, very little can truly control you. People may insult you, you remain composed. People may reject you, you remain grounded. People may misunderstand you, you remain focused. People may leave, you remain whole. People may praise you, you remain humble. Success may arrive, you remain disciplined. Failure may arrive, you remain committed because your center is no longer outside of you. You have built it within, and that is where real power begins. Not in controlling others, not in intimidating others, not in making people fear you, but in becoming the kind of person who does not need to control others in order to feel powerful. The world will always attempt to pull you outward toward comparison, toward approval, toward anger, toward distraction, toward impatience, toward ego, toward instant gratification. But you can return inward, pause, observe, choose. That is self-control. And every time you do it, you strengthen the person who is ultimately responsible for your life. Because the greatest victory is not making someone else submit. It is refusing to become a slave to your own impulses. The greatest form of confidence is not believing that nothing can go wrong. It is knowing that whatever happens, you can handle yourself. The greatest form of freedom is not having everything you want. It is no longer being controlled by everything you want. And the deepest form of power is not having authority over other people. It is having authority over yourself. When you reach that point, you stop chasing power, you become powerful, and you stop trying to control the world because you have finally learned how to control the one thing that was always within your reach, yourself.